Hey, what's going on guys? Today we are going to be going through the top 5 best champions to main in solo queue. One champion per lane. So if you want to find out who they are, make sure to watch this video all the way through to the end. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. An age-old saying in League of Legends is that the fastest way to climb is to only play one champion. By only playing one champion, you'll be able to thoroughly understand the champion's mechanics, damage outputs and combos, giving you an immediate advantage over your opponents who might not understand their champion as well as you understand yours. It is then important when deciding which champion to main to pick a champion that suits your playstyle and strengths as a player. At the same time, it can be difficult to decide which champion to main because a champion's strength and meta adaptability can change over time. The champions on this list are the ones I personally believe will always remain very strong in the meta and are very rewarding for those that put in the time and effort into learning them. So let's start off the list with top lane with Fiora. Fiora has been consistently one of the best top laners throughout League's history, especially in solo queue. Fiora's unmatched 1v1 potential, high skill ceiling, as well as her immense scaling have made her a very versatile and popular pick in almost all metas. Depending on the patch, Fiora sometimes has very few or zero counters. Contrarily, Fiora can oftentimes hard counter many champions and win or at least go even in most matchups. In many cases, Fiora can be a direct counter to many of the strongest champions within a certain patch. A few examples of this in recent days are Gwen, Sion and Irelia-centric metas, Fiora being a direct counter to all of these picks. While Fiora has countless strengths, she also does have a few weaknesses. One of the downsides of a champion that is dominant in so many specific matchups is that the champion will tend to be banned out a lot. Fiora is definitely no stranger to this and sometimes will hold the highest ban rate out of any top laner in a patch. On top of this, Fiora, like many melee bruiser top lanes, will struggle into many top lane ranged matchups, such as Queen and Akshan. Lastly, Fiora tends to struggle in teamfights. She has very minimal crowd control in her kit, only her parry, making it extremely difficult to peel for her carries should she need to. While she completely counters most tanks, Fiora isn't very tanky on her own. If Fiora is played alongside things such as assassin junglers and enchanter supports, the team comp may have little to no frontline. In most cases, Fiora lacks engagement for her team and generally acts as a second or counter-engage tool, similarly to Viego or Akali. You mostly want to split push with Fiora. The reason Fiora isn't picked that often in pro play is that unlike solo queue, professional teams tend to favor champions with strong team cohesion. And Fiora as a champion is generally not thematic with many team comps. But while she does falter in some areas, there is a reason Fiora is so popular and constantly strong pick in solo queue. She is a very versatile champion who can dominate most matchups and can absolutely 1v9 a game. While the champion kit is pretty basic and fairly easy to learn, her skill ceiling is extremely high, making her a fantastic champion to one trick or main. Moving on to the jungle, we have Kayn, or Rust. Kayn is one of the most versatile and consistently strong solo queue junglers. A trait that is unique to Kayn is his ability to transform into Rust or Shadow Assassin form. Rust is better in most cases, but there will definitely be fringe games where Shadow Assassin is favorable. In this video we will be specifically discussing Rust, as it is by far and away the stronger and more favorable option of the two. Rust has a relatively basic kit and is easy to learn, but is also very rewarding for those who decide to invest time into Rust. Rust has an extremely fast clear speed, as well as high mobility, teamfight attrition, and solid damage. He excels in the early game, but unlike many other late game jungler champions, it is a necessity to fight on Rust to get his form. One of the most difficult parts of Rust is piloting his early game and balancing his quick clear with ganks and invades. Not necessarily always for a kill, but in many cases to look to build up his passive. Rust excels at invading the enemy jungle because of his high mobility and very fast clear speed. However, Rust doesn't win early game skirmishes against many jungle champions, and because of this, you'll generally want to be able to track the enemy jungler and steal camps while avoiding the enemy. Rust mainly spikes in the mid-late game, and relative to the team comps can also be an individual late game win condition, if the enemy doesn't have any answers to the champion. While some matchups are more difficult, Rust, in a vacuum, doesn't have many bad matchups. There won't be many instances where Rust ever feels unplayable or dominated by his jungle matchup. Rust does, however, suffer against poke or ranged team comps, and is also very vulnerable to being invaded in the early game. Contrarily, Rust thrives against engaged comps that are forced to go all in on him. His kit isn't very complicated either, but part of being able to excel at him, like all other junglers, is being able to track the enemy jungler and have a decisive and effective decision making. Being able to learn the champion's limits is a quality that is very critical to maining Rust and is something that will come with practice. He is a champion that, if you decide to main, will show results very quickly. Moving on to the mid lane, we have Anivia. There are very few, if any, patches where Anivia is a weak champion. This bird is iconic for being a one-trick champion, as her playstyle is very unique. She is a DPS control mage. Though her kit is quite simple, the difficult part of Anivia lies in her laning phase, her terrain utilization and having good positioning. If you have ever played against a really good Anivia, you know firsthand how quickly a good Anivia can take over and completely 1v9 a game. Anivia is a champion who is intrinsically very annoying to play against, and the rarity of the pick means most people don't know how to shut down or play against it properly. An Anivia who is even or ahead is very annoying and difficult to play against, but on the other hand, an Anivia that is behind often feels useless and irrelevant. She is a champion like Gangplank or Irelia, where the player base is extremely polarized. Those that play and understand the champion can single-handedly win the game for their team. Alternatively, those who don't play the champion will find it extremely difficult to do well and can individually lose games for their team. Anivia takes a lot of practice and has a very high skill floor. Her farming, especially pre-level 6, is very difficult, and in turn her laning as well. Anivia takes a lot of practice and has a very high skill floor. Her farming, especially pre-6, and in turn her laning phase are all very difficult. This is due to her weak, slow, ranged auto attacks, which take a lot of training to get used to. Aside from her laning, Anivia players need to constantly position well in teamfights and make especially good use of her teamfight defining W ability. Anivia's W, Crystallize, is one of the key defining aspects of her kit, and using it effectively can make or break a teamfight. Building terrain, especially to the magnitude that Anivia can, is very uncommon, and most players tend to misposition as a result of this. Anivia as a champion won't deal upfront as much damage as some other AP mid lane mages, but her utility is unparalleled. While her W is her most prominent utility, her R and even her Q are fantastic zoning tools as well. Because she has one of the best terrain control kits in the game, She thrives especially in jungle teamfights, where she is able to control the fight and play to her kit's strength. Ultimately, while Anivia is a very difficult champion to learn, she is a fantastic champion to put time into, and the reward will definitely be worth it. Now, to the ADC role. We have Jhin. Jhin for a long time has consistently been an S-tier ADC. He constantly tops the ADC tier lists and makes his way back into professional play time and time again. Jhin's playstyle differs from many ADCs because he doesn't rely on a high attack speed to deal consistent damage. Instead, his auto attacks are based on a 4-shot reload mechanic that allows him to deal strong bursts of damage. Because of his lack of damage per second, Jhin struggles against tankier champions, which is a major weakness. Conversely, Jhin excels against squishy champions, bursting them with his insane amounts of burst. With a decent laning phase and an above average early game, Jhin snowballs extremely well. When ahead, he is able to reach his lethal threshold very quickly and delete enemy champions. While his late game isn't bad by any means, he does tend to get outscaled by a lot of ADCs. Because of this, he plays to win early, snowball and close out the game quickly before any champions can contest him. With his W Deadly Flourish, being a long range CC and his E Captive Audience providing vision and a slow, Jhin supplies his team with solid utility. Understanding Jhin's mechanics and understanding his limits, especially with the very punishable reload mechanic, is what differentiates a decent Jhin player from a great Jhin player. Because of this, when Jhin players must utilize the high execution ability of his 4th shot, Jhin's ability to execute enemies is unmatched, and as a result, it's very practical to understand Jhin's damage capability and output to be able to utilize Jhin to his fullest potential. On support, we have Soraka. Soraka has been heavily overlooked and underrated for a long time. Even though she is generally not as popular in pro play, she has been showing up more and more recently. Soraka has gone unchanged for a while and continues to be an S-tier pick in not only support but also top, mid and ADC. Personally, I'd say Soraka's best role is in support and is actually ADC or top. Naturally, these options are not as feasible in solo queue. Soraka doesn't have many hard counters in lane and has ridiculous stats overall. And as an enchanter, Soraka benefits from longer and more drawn out games and will struggle more in the fast-paced volatile games. In solo queue, players tend to make more mistakes and are less coordinated in comparison to pro play. In solo queue, players tend to make more mistakes and are less coordinated in comparison to pro play, where plays are better executed and mistakes are minimized. Because of this, Soraka thrives even more in a solo queue environment, where she is given the time to scale and won't be punished in the early game very often. Learning Soraka is relatively easy, as her kit is quite simple. The difficulty of Soraka lies in the need to position well on her, being able to utilize her CC and heals to the maximum, while still being able to avoid dying. By playing Soraka in many cases, you might be strong enough to prevent your carries from dying on any engage, which will in turn make you the initial target of the enemy team. It is very crucial to be cognizant of the enemy's team to kill you. For example, understanding whether they will be attempting to assassinate, isolate or flank you. Soraka flourishes in front-to-back fights, where she is able to keep her team healthy while being protected from potential flanks. Soraka has fantastic disengage and team fighting, but poor positioning can be very detrimental and easily punished. Due to her ridiculous stats, especially with Moonstone Renewer, the enemy team is forced to purchase Grievous Wounds items somewhat early, which is often very gold inefficient. but they risk being completely run over in fights if they neglect to purchase it. Even with a simple kit, being able to properly and effectively make use of all her utility in both CC and heals takes a lot of game knowledge, time and practice. And there you go guys. These champions will always be strong solo queue picks and will almost never fall out of the meta. Given the proper time, practice and dedication, mastering these champions will show results and be undoubtedly rewarding. If you enjoyed the list, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe. If you disagree with our list, let us know in the comments down below. That's it for today guys. See you next time. Peace.